Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a conversation between a male clerk in a hire company and a woman customer. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello, welcome to Harry's Hire Company. How can I help you?
Oh, hi, yes. I've come in to find out about renting stuff for a 21st birthday party.
Yes, of course. First of all, what date is the party?
It's next Saturday. That was the closest we could get to the actual birthday, which is the 22nd of November. Gosh, it's hard to believe it was 21 years ago. Seems like yesterday.
So the 18th of November?
No, sorry. I meant the following Saturday, the 25th.
Okay, we have just about everything here. Tableware, marquees, you name it, we rent it. What size of event are we talking about here?
Yes, that's a good question. We were planning to have about 40 people, but you know how these things grow, and it went up to 60 at one stage. I think it's back to 55 now. Yes, that's right. It was all getting a bit out of hand.
Okay, and what kind of catering and entertainment are you having? We can help with entertainment hire too. You know, if you need microphones or a sound system.
Oh, that's good. We've booked a catering company and they're providing a meal. It's nothing elaborate, just finger food snacks and then a simple buffet meal. So we'll need all the usual dinner plates and bowls. I suppose 5 dozen of everything. Oh, and knives and forks too, 5 dozen sets. We won't need any cooking equipment because the caterers will do that. And they're providing tea and coffee as well.
I see. And do you need any tables or chairs?
Well, not tables, because we wouldn't have room for them. But I suppose some extra chairs might come in handy. What type do you have?
Come over here and I'll show you. We have a couple of different kinds. We do have the folding wooden ones, like these. But the most popular ones are just those stackable plastic garden chairs. We rent a lot of those.
Yes, the plastic ones look great. Maybe 40 of those.
Okay. I'm making a list here as we speak. Was there anything else? Oh, do you want small or medium glasses? People generally want both sizes.
Yeah, better get both kinds. 4 dozen of each. And what else? The caterers are supplying a punch bowl, so that's okay. Oh, I know. What about 6 ice buckets for keeping the drinks cold? We're providing all the drinks because I have a friend who's helping us with that. I suppose this is going to get very expensive.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Well, let's talk about our packages and rental deals. Firstly, what day do you want to collect the equipment?
Oh, I'm not sure. Does that make a difference to the price?
Well, the weekend package deal is to pick up after 5 p.m. on Friday and drop off before 10 a.m. on Monday. That will be $1,600 plus tax. If you want to save a bit of money, you can collect the equipment on the day of the party before 5 p.m. and drop off on the Monday before 10 a.m, and that will be $1,350 plus tax. That's called the same day package. Your party numbers come between our small and medium price packages, I'm afraid. So in fact, you could rent a few extra of everything for the same price.
I see. Well, we're not inviting more guests. I think we have quite enough already. Are there any other hidden charges with those packages?
No, not really. But if you want us to drop off and pick up at your house, there is an extra home delivery charge of $50, provided you live within 10 kilometres of here. Oh, and if you want to take out breakage insurance, that's a $60 flat fee. Otherwise, you pay for every item you break at the replacement cost.
Wow, so how much is that then? I bet that soon adds up.
Well, yes, it does a bit. Let's see. Tableware is $3.55 a piece, small glasses are $3.50, and medium glasses are $4.40. Oh, and if you break a chair, they're expensive, $15 each. And you'll be surprised what happens when the party gets going.
Yes, insurance sounds like a good idea. And I think I'll take the weekend package deal, thanks. It's much more convenient, isn't it? And not much more expensive.
Okay, so let's take a few details then. Your name?
Oh, it's Susan Millins.
Is that Miller?
No, it's Millins.
Right, and your address, please?
28B Sandstone Close, Martinsborough.
And just to confirm the order, the medium-sized party weekend package with breakage insurance. And did you want to collect this yourself?
Yes, thank you. I do live within 10 k's, but I don't want to pay any extra charges. I'll get my son to help me.
Okay, we'll need an emergency contact number, just in case anything goes wrong. Oh, and credit card details, of course.
Oh, yes, of course. The phone number is 084-398-7695.
Okay, thank you. And now the credit card.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You'll hear a tour guide giving a talk about a museum centre called Riverside Industrial Village. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 13. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 13.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Riverside Industrial Village. To start your visit, I'm just going to give you a brief account of the history of the museum before letting you roam about on your own. I won't keep you long, okay? Now, from where we're standing, you've got a good view of the river over there. And it was because of this fast-flowing water that this site was a natural place for manufacturing works. The water and the availability of raw materials in the area like minerals and iron ore, and also the abundance of local fuels like coal and firewood, all made this site suitable for industry from a very early time. Water was the main source of power for the early industries, and some of the water wheels were first established in the 12th century, would you believe? At that time, local craftsmen first built an iron forge just behind the village here on the bend in the river. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the region's rivers supported more than 160 watermills, and many of these continued to operate well into the 19th century. But then the steam engine was invented, and then the railways came, and the centres of industry were able to move away from the rivers and the countryside and into the towns. So industrial villages like this one became very rare. So, that's the history for you. If you'd like any more information, you can ask me some questions, or you can read further in our excellent guidebook.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 14 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 14 to 20.
Now, I'm going to give you a plan of the site, and I'd just like to point out where everything is, and then you can take a look at everything for yourself. I've already pointed out the river, which is on the left, and of course, running along the bottom is Woodside Road. Got it? OK. Now, we're standing at the entrance. See it at the bottom? And immediately to our right is the ticket office. You won't need that, because you've got your group booking, but just past it are the toilets. Always good to know where they are. In front of us is the car park, as you can see, and to the left, by the entry gate, is the gift shop. That's where you can get copies of the guide, like this one here. Now, beyond the car park, all the buildings are arranged in a half circle with a yard in the middle. The big stone building at the top is the main workshop. That's where the furnace is, and where all the metal was smelted and the tools were cast, as you'll be able to see. Now, in the top right-hand corner, that building with bigger windows is the showroom, where samples of all the tools that were made through the ages are on display. In the top left corner is the grinding shop, where the tools were sharpened and finished. And on one side of that, you can see the engine room, and on the other is the cafe, which isn't an antique, you'll be pleased to know, though they do serve very nice old-fashioned teas. The row of buildings you can see on the left are the cottages. These were built for the workers towards the end of the 18th century, and they're still furnished from that period, so you can get a good idea of ordinary people's living conditions. Across the yard from them, you can see the stables, where the horses were kept for transporting the products. And the separate building in front of them is the works office, and that still has some of the old accounts on display. Right, if anyone wants a guided tour, then I'm starting at the engine room. If you'd like to come along this way, please, ladies and gentlemen.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You will hear a conversation between a student called Mary and her tutor, Mr. Hadstone. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 25. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Hello, Mr. Headstone. Is this the right time for our meeting?
Yes, it is. Thanks for coming in at such a late hour, Mary. I know you've had a busy day studying and will be keen to get home. And thanks for volunteering to run this project. It's going to help you develop and practice skills needed by teachers today. Field trips are getting more and more a part of school life. So as a student of education, it'll be wonderful training for you. It's really a great opportunity.
We did loads of field trips at school, so I've got a good idea of what sort of things we could do.
I expect so. But we're here to go through the basics of planning one, and the trip leader carries a load of responsibility. Right now, you're focusing on activities, but your main job is to consider the dangers and come up with ways of countering or avoiding them. There are lots of government regulations you won't have been aware of on your school trips, but they're just a guideline for your own planning. Some of those school trips you went on would have been pretty adventurous, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and your plan needs to be tailored to the kind of trip you're doing. On a well-planned and successfully led adventure trip, we don't often hear of problems, even though sometimes there's bad weather, for example, that a school party has managed to combat. That's because the leader created a well-thought-out hazard management plan.
Ah! I thought I'd just be taking my mates out on a trek. Now it's all paperwork.
Yes, well, that's why I called you in. We'll work on this together over the next few days. I just wanted to give you a heads up on what you'll need to think about. There are some aspects that every trip needs to consider. What do you think they might be?
Well, heavy rain or high winds, I guess, and any dangers in the terrain?
Yes, we call those the significant factors. And another important one is the makeup of your group. But you don't need to go overboard. There are some kinds of hazard that you won't need to think about at all. Things like hurricanes, earthquakes, radioactivity, or major diseases such as cancer. The official name for those is unlikely events, because they almost certainly won't happen.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 26 to 30.
Okay, so let's consider the hazards seen as most likely on a field trip into the countryside. Weather causes real problems. Overexposure to the sun or the cold, even the wind, can have a big impact. And of course, the weather can change very suddenly and without warning.
Yes. People can get into trouble in the hills if they don't bring extra layers of clothes and a jacket, even if they start walking on a hot day. Oh, and a raincoat too, of course. What's next then?
Well, let's think about possible activities and what you might need.
Yes, okay. Well, for hiking, of course, we need a first aid kit. Oh, and a decent topographic map of the area. And we need to make sure that more than one person can read it. I've run into lots of difficulties in the past with people who can't identify even major features, like rivers. And some people have no idea about contour lines. And I suppose a compass, too.
You'd need to list those. Then there are things that might be obvious but must be written down and considered seriously. For example, if there's a possibility of falling more than 2.5 meters, that's considered life-threatening. And I'm sure you would be aware of problems near the sea, like tides or high waves. And the trouble you can get into where there's a possibility of an avalanche or a mudslide or a flash flood if you're anywhere near rivers.
Yes, Well, I was thinking of an adventurous route for this trip. You know, that's always more fun. And it's such a cool feeling when you've achieved something really difficult.
Yes, okay, but then you need to consider who's going to be in your party. Don't go and plan things that are beyond the reach of most people, or you're asking for trouble. You need to take into account the physical strength and experience of the party as a whole. When you make your groups, make sure there's at least one person in each one who's been hiking a few times before.
Wow! There's a lot to write down, isn't there? I'm really keen to get started now.
Well, good, because there's a lot more detail to consider. For now, I'll just mention 2 more of the common hazards for high school trips in particular.
Yes?
The Ministry of Education website says don't use inexperienced volunteers. And don't allow student drivers to bring their own cars, or to drive anyone else's car for that matter.
Well, now I really have something to think about. Thanks, Mr. Headstone.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 4. Section 4. You'll hear a talk on the subject of the urban landscape. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I have been asked today to talk to you about the urban landscape. There are 2 major areas that I will focus on in my talk: how vegetation can have a significant effect on urban climate, and how we can better plan our cities using trees to provide a more comfortable environment for us to live in. Trees can have a significant impact on our cities. They can make a city as a whole a bit less windy, or a bit more windy if that's what you want. They can make it a bit cooler if it's a hot summer day in an Australian city, or they can make it a bit more humid if it's a dry inland city. On the local scale, that is in particular areas within the city, trees can make the local area more shady, cooler, more humid and much less windy. In fact, trees, and planting of various kinds, can be used to make city streets actually less dangerous in particular areas. How do trees do all that, you ask? Well, the main difference between a tree and a building is a tree has got an internal mechanism to keep the temperature regulated. It evaporates water through its leaves, and that means that the temperature of the leaves is never very far from our own body temperature. The temperature of a building surface on a hot sunny day can easily be 20 degrees more than our temperature. Trees, on the other hand, remain cooler than buildings because they sweat. This means that they can humidify the air and cool it, a property which can be exploited to improve the local climate. Trees can also help break the force of winds. The reason that high buildings make it windier at ground level is that as the wind goes higher and higher, it goes faster and faster. When the wind hits the building, it has to go somewhere, Some of it goes over the top, and some goes around the sides of the building, forcing those high-level winds down to ground level. That doesn't happen when you have trees. Trees filter the wind and considerably reduce it, preventing those very large, strong gusts that you so often find around tall buildings. Another problem in built-up areas is that traffic noise is intensified by tall buildings. By planting a belt of trees at the side of the road, you can make things a little quieter, but much of the vehicle noise still goes through the trees. Trees can also help reduce the amount of noise in the surroundings, although the effect is not as large as people like to think. Low-frequency noise in particular just goes through the trees as though they aren't there. Although trees can significantly improve the local climate, they do, however, take up a lot of space. There are root systems to consider, and branches blocking windows and so on. It may therefore be difficult to fit trees into the local landscape. There is not a great deal you can do if you have what we call a street canyon, a whole set of high-rises enclosed in a narrow street. Trees need water to grow. They also need some sunlight to grow, and you need room to put them. If you have the chance of knocking buildings down and replacing them, then suddenly you can start looking at different ways to design the streets and to introduce tree planting.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.